Yeah, there was a big influence, I would say, from the surrounding to my personality and the way I grew up. I think it was a lot about self-sufficiency. I mean, what you see here is the garden, you know, it's the same time, you know, it's vegetable, it's food cultivation, fruits and so on, but also at the same time beauty, you know, this combination and this symbiosis of usage and necessity and also beauty that I think is part of a really essential human need. Yeah, and I also grew up surrounded by an architecture that is very much archaic in a way and very, you know, also born out of the material from that place, from that region. And this connection, you know, this identity that is kind of, yeah, growing out of existing resources and the massiveness of the walls and also this protective feeling that it brings. This was certainly something that is also visible in my architecture as well, only in a more contemporary way. But I really love this archaic feelings. I think that's really something that touches everyone. And we have a lot of people living from all sorts of countries, from Syria, from Palestine and so on. You can see even, you know, they have no connection with that religion and the church itself, but there is, you know, these archaic spaces. This is something, you know, you feel well. And it was fantastic to grow up, you know, I have as a kind of playground to have this Gothic kind of wall systems and everything that was, and the lines that are built out of the local stones and everything. That was kind of the tools and the toys that we had when we were growing up in the bunch of kids around. So that was certainly shaping me a lot. So Laufen, where I grew up, is also very much linked to the resources of the nature, like the salt and the salt trade that shaped the history of it. So naturally also the tradition, the culture of this place is something, as a shaping element, is something that is also very dominant here. And I would say that is also something that for me raised an interest how in other parts of the world this is shaping, you know, to see this from another perspective. That's why I went from Bavaria to Bangladesh, you know, completely different cultural context, just to see, you know, how is that local traditions along with local resources and you know, the people, the atmosphere is shaping architecture, is shaping natural habitat, and of course also the search of people on the way to happiness in a way. You know, how can you go to the aim to really reach a life that is somehow in balance with nature. And of course Bangladesh is still a very authentic culture, so that was for me a perfect spot to go from this surrounding after I graduated from school. So that I think there's a lot of similarity between the life that is here and anywhere else. I would say Bangladesh in particular, it's always, you know, what existing resources do you have and how can you use your creativity to make the best out of it. And that's what I'm trying to do with my architecture. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the church that we see in the background from the Gothic times is of course a wonderful example how you can make something beautiful out of what you find. And that's of course something, I think, you know, this, how it had happened that people get together and say, okay, we wanna build something together, you know, and this identity that is linked with that, and this pride when you stand in the end in front of that church and say, yeah, well, we built it, and that community spirit that created, I think this is something that we have to incorporate in our modern architecture as well. Again, it's not just about the outcome and the architecture, but also about designing the process. And that's what I also try to include in the Metis School, for example, or not just in any project that I'm doing. I'm trying to bring in this notion, you know, that yeah, community gets together and get the hands involved in the building process as well. And then in the end, if you stand in front of that building, you just feel an extreme trust in your own potentials and also in the team, the community, and in the local resources that you have. Yeah, what has awakened my curiosity to travel and to see other places in the world? I think yeah, once you feel confident and, you know, rooted somewhere, I think the moment you also start out to look for different places, you know, and I feel very much rooted here. It's also really my refugee. I mean, I'm traveling a lot, very much actually, but it's always good to come back. But I think, you know, if you have strong roots, then it's much easier to go away and discover new horizons. My work is totally mixed. I'm, of course, an architect, but I'm also a development worker. I'm also an activist. And in general, I think there's this itching, this creative itching in me. And if I see a need somewhere and I see a potential, then it makes zing, and then something is coming out. And I can't tell whether it's a building or it's a shirt or anything. But I'm trying to use the creativity always as a tool to improve lives. When I start a project, I normally go to the place and try to figure out what are the resources available. And that means in terms of materiality, in terms of energy sources, and in terms of know-how, craft skills, and so on. And for me, it's essential that the materials are local, the energy sources are local, and with energy sources, I particularly think of human labor, because that's a wonderful source of energy. Whenever we think of alternative sources of energy, we think of solar, wind, and so on. But I think the human labor, the human energy is also very important. And furthermore, if we don't use it, then we create a social problem. So this is for me the most important energy source. And then as for the know-how, I think that should be unlimited. You know, I'm of course looking what are the skills of the place. But I also add, you know, all the know-how that is available, you know, and is in the radar somewhere. I think, you know, this knowledge should not be limited to a place, but it should be applied to the local conditions. It should make sense to find the appropriate language, the appropriate technology and material use and so on. Yeah, I mean, materials is a lot of weight. So if they're coming from far away, that just needs a lot of transportation. And furthermore, I think it's absolutely not needed. We have fantastic natural building materials all around. We just need to see them and be aware of it. I was, for example, once I did this exercise or challenge with my students from ETH. We went, it was the end of October, we went to the mountains, and it was really cold already that time. And then I surprised them with the fact that there was no hut or hotel or hostel booked for the night, and the challenge was to build your own shelter for the night. And that was an amazing experience. I mean, it was really quite tough, but it was an amazing experience to see how much is given by nature for free, and that we just need our, you know, the sensitiveness to see it and the creativity to use those resources. And that very much linked to, you know, how I was brought up in childhood, because I was often in the woods and would just build huts and, you know, with willows or whatever. And then, of course, with the scouts, I was a Girl Scout. So when we would go on a camp, you know, on a summer camp for 2 weeks, we would just bring our clothes, the tents, and the rest we would just build up by ourselves what we would find on the place. And it was amazing to see how a little settlement could really be built with just, you know, the people and the resources that we find. And that, of course, shaped me a lot as well. For me, sustainability is, I would say, a really good harmony with nature, with the socio-cultural context, with the people, the users. So it's kind of also doing things with love and care, and not just, you know, on a formal level solve a problem, but really doing something with love. And I think beauty for me is an expression of love, and for me, sustainability is a synonym of beauty. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is some activism going on. If you see in the background, there is the sign "Less concrete, more earth." And what I figured out is like, yeah, we just can't continue building as we do. It's not working. And what I figured out while working here in Germany is that always the cheaper solution is always the less sustainable one. In Bangladesh, the cheapest solution is also the sustainable one. You just take the dirt from the ground and you build it with your hand. If you do this in Germany, in Europe, it's damn expensive. And there is really, that makes me angry. And it's not the problem of the mud and earthen technologies or earthen architecture, but that's the problem of our economic system. So we really have to readjust our system and really have a higher price on materials that have a high embodied level of energy resources that are based on fossil fuels, for example, and create a lot of carbon emissions. So we really have to tax those, and we have to decrease the taxes on human labor. And I think that would completely change our economic system, of course, but also of our social system. So it would not make just a few people rich, but it would in fact make really a strong middle class and really build up people. And for me, the most important part of a construction site and a building is that the biggest part of the budget really remains with people, with the craftsmen. So for me, a building is not just a building, but it also is a catalyst for change and for local development. I think we always should have in our minds that only because we have the money and the resources, we shouldn't exceed, the limitations that everybody has. We have one planet, and we should also design that we only have one planet and we are one humankind. And just because I could afford it to build a building with a lot of resources, like lots of steel, lots of carbon emissions, lots of concrete, I shouldn't do it because it's harming. It's using up more resources than actually one person can, or this couple of persons that are visiting this opera should actually consume. So whenever I'm designing, I really have this thing in mind, times 7 billion. Every action, every decisions that I'm taking, I'm really considering, okay, what would the world look like if 7.5 billion people would do it in the same way? And that's quite an intense question because, if you use that paint, it's maybe just a bucket of paint, but if 7 billion people are using that paint that is actually harming the groundwater, then it looks bad. So no, I don't have the right to use that paint, and that's kind of the way my approach is. I went to Bangladesh when I was 19 years old, and I was kind of development learner of a local NGO, of a Bangladeshi NGO called Deepshika. And what I learned there was that the most effective strategy for development is to use the existing resources and not get depending on external factors. And that was exactly what I tried to bring into architecture. Of course, in the beginning it was a challenge. None of the workers had ever used a meter or a scale or a split level. So it was really something, they had a feeling for the earth, but it was just dirt and you just pile it somehow into a wall, but it was always just a temporary solution. Mud was not considered to be equal to brick or to concrete. So it was just a temporary dirty solution. So I think the most important part was really to show that, with a good craftsmanship, you can really, really improve the quality of houses and, of course, with the design. And in the beginning, they were not really convinced of that whole project, but they were happy to have jobs. It was essential for them. And then, in the afternoon or in the evening, we went together with the bicycle to the local markets, and I could immediately see how they spent the money that they just got, because they get it every day, and they spent it in the local vegetables, and from the neighbor farmer, or the woman, the wife got a new blouse. So it was really a catalyst for the local development, and that was wonderful to see, and that obviously shaped my view on architecture also a lot, because for me it was in the beginning more an environmental approach. I was really sensitive towards the environment, so I didn't want to harm the planet. And with the mud, it's the only material that you can take from the ground. You can recycle it as often as you want without any loss of quality. And you can return it back to the ground it came from, and you can plant your garden on top. So it can't be topped in terms of environmental sustainability. But the social part, really, that was something that I learned through the process. How much power is in that. That was fascinating to see. Of course, I wanted to have women on the site involved as well. And during the first project at the Midday School, it didn't work out. It was just, I was told it's not part of our culture. And I kind of accepted that. But then on the second side, I had a lot of students with me, and they were also, the floor level was quite high on the site. And when I was walking through the village, I could feel like the wives of the workers staring at me in a really awkward way. And I thought, okay, there's some friction going on. That's not what I want, so I talked to the wives. And then I just invited them if they would like to join the site as workers. And then they said, of course we would like to, but we don't know how to get involved. And that's the nice part with the mod, because it's so inclusive. You find work for everyone. We had people with disabilities working on the site. We had children involved on the site, and of course the women. And then it was funny, so we figured out that they traditionally do the plastering, but they can't use the tool system, so they can just do it with their hands. I said, fine, looks anyway more beautiful to me. So then said, but don't tell our husbands. It was the announcement from them. Said, no, I'm not. And then the next morning, like 7 o'clock, the workers came. 5 minutes later, their wives showed up. And then, of course, it was like, now the fun is over. But after like 2-3 days, they started flirting with their own wives. It was because it was like such a good team spirit on the site, and we're working all on an eye level, and we also made sure that we as architects were also doing the least accepted work, like carrying the mud on the heads and so on. So it was really, we were really trying to break up hierarchies and really try to foster this team spirit. And that was fantastic for the women. They queued in the same line for getting the same salary as the husbands, and working side by side. That really changed also on the social level in the village. I think there's a lot of good-looking architecture all around, but I think a good-looking architecture is not enough. I think it really has to bring meaning to the people, and of course also adds to a healthy planet. And that's what I'm trying to do with the work. With this building, everything comes together. First of all, it's fantastic to see how the workers developed over this period of time. It was 2005 when we started. And so until we still have the core team is still involved on the site. And from my team and myself, we were like 3 times on the site, but on a very small, short period. And they were just doing it on their own, and they were showing me through the building and radiating with pride, what they were able to do. And it's not an easy building, it's super curvy, and the geometry is not easy, but they just did it, and they were so proud, and they were actively looking for solutions. And before they would just, wait until they get told something. But now they were completely engaged in it. And that was a fantastic thing to see, that the know-how transfer completely worked out in that way. And the building itself is a center for people with disabilities. And we also had them included in the building process. And then on top of it is a workshop for textiles, for fair fashion, Dipti Textiles. It's also a project that we started with the NGO Diepschike and with a tailor from Laufen, Veronica Lang. And it's something very important to me too, because it gives work opportunities for the women in Bangladesh. And they don't have to leave their homes and have to work in the factories where they really have inhumane conditions. And for me, it's also a bit of the textiles look like a fashion project, but for me it's an architectural project as well, because it enables the people to stay in the village, and they don't have to move away, and they can create so much of their daily needs and daily goods that by themselves in the village. They can build their own houses with just, the mud. They can grow their own food. They don't have to pay for the water. They just, get it. And they also don't need electricity because it's fine. You just live in the cycle of nature, also with the daylight and everything. And there's just so much, community, and that you focus more on, interaction and meaningful relationships rather than on amusement. So it really works without a lot of things that people need in towns. And the footprint, of course, is much more ecological in the village than in the towns, and the living quality. So this building is kind of bringing really everything together. From the architectural point of view, I was diving even more into the material characteristics, because in the beginning, I built everything straight, and I think it was important to show the workers, this is a real building material. You can build in a very accurate and precise way, and with this one, mud can be just much more than just a edgy straight wall. And so this wall is really, this time the walls are dancing. And the most important thing is a ramp that is kind of winding and dancing around the building. And that ramp is essential because that's the symbol for inclusiveness. And it's the only ramp in that area. And of course, it's the most predominant thing when you approach that building. And first is coming the question, hey, what is this? Why do you need a ramp? And of course, this triggers all these questions, why is inclusiveness important? So through the architecture, you already raise a lot of awareness on the importance of including everyone as part of our society. And also, that the normal box, kind of the normal square architecture box, the functional box is kind of, well, that's one thing, but you can also kind of dance out of the road. That's the saying that we have in Germany. And it's beautiful if you're not just a straight normal box, that diversity is something beautiful and it's something to celebrate. And that kind of, that architecture really wants to celebrate this diversity and this inclusiveness. Much more than just a building. It's a social space. It really has an impact on the society, on the community there. For example, also the women, they usually don't have a job, a profession. They're just, working as day laborers on the field or in a household, and or chopping the bricks, which is a very hard work. And now, in the beginning we thought they would just come and get the textiles and the design, and they would do it at home next to the children. They could just, work along their own rhythm. But the women enjoyed it so much to come together and to have a place where they could actually meet and talk about their problems or, joys, whatever. That was so important. And of course, our work speed is allowing this kind of intervention or interaction. And that was something also, this pride. I'm going to the office now, I'm going to my workplace. That adds so much to the pride and to the dignity. And the same for the people with disability. They were just not visible really, because it's unfortunately, there is no know-how and awareness that you can improve situations, that with some physical training you can, strengthening muscles, and and of course there are a lot of massage techniques there existing, and of course with certain technical equipment you can really improve situations. That know-how or that awareness is not existing there, because you just take it as a challenge from God, from Allah, or it is a karma from a previous life. And you just take it as it is, the situation, but you're not trying to improve your life or the life of your child that is disabled. And to know that it's not a punishment, to have a a child that is disabled, but to have, you know, to get help and to have a good place to, you know, where you can go to and you are rooted there and it's your place that, and people are coming to see that place and you know, there's a lot of local tourism going on because people are really astonished of that building and that gives a lot of dignity. I think architecture is really a powerful tool to shape our society. And just by the way we choose our materials, the construction process, and how many people we include in the process, for example, we really have a powerful tool to really make an impact. And for me, the essential question that I always have in the back of my mind when I'm designing and deciding is, what if 7 billion people would decide the same way? Having the same approach, having, you know, the same decision on the material, on the way the resources are used and the space is used up, for example. And would it contribute to social justice or would it contribute to, you know, a destabilization of the ecosystems? And all these questions I'm trying to really have in my mind when I'm designing, because I deeply believe that the world is not changing with one big decision. It's the everyday small decisions that are really shaping our environment and our society. My dreams for the future, well, I would particularly like to do something for the Rohingya people in the refugee camp in Bangladesh. But I mean, all the projects that I'm doing, I really love them. And it's, you know, no matter if it's for children in Zimbabwe or in Ghana or in Bangladesh or in Germany, there's always, you know, a need, and there's always a lot of reason and a lot of need to bring humanity in, and also some gentleness and empathy and love. And I really like all the projects. What I would hope for the future, that I'm not confronted with that fear every time when I'm proposing I would like to build with earth or with bamboo. That is just the core problem of sustainability, you know, that these natural materials are so much linked with vulnerability. But in fact, you know, like the vulnerability of earth is also the biggest advantage, that it can go back to the ground without harming the environment. You know, we are a waste society, but we are trying to build in the most durable way. In fact, you know, we never built for eternity. I'm fully okay if my buildings are decomposing one day. And what I'm hoping that I'm really leaving no waste, but knowledge. You know, the know-how, how to build something good out of the local resources. That's my dream. Of course, it would be lovely to build something in my hometown in Laufen. And yes, I would totally build it out of rammed earth, because I think that's the fascinating thing, that, you know, once a earth building is standing, you couldn't tell if it's there since one day or since hundreds of years. It has immediately this kind of archaic feeling, but it also is not dominant, you know, it's just there in a very calm and present way. And I think that would really beautifully blend in this historic surrounding.